In 1957, a man stepped off a Greyhound bus in Coshocton, Ohio, carrying only a small brown suitcase and a notebook with a cracked leather cover. He didn't speak to anyone. He walked straight to a quiet boarding house at the edge of town, paid for a room in cash, and introduced himself as John Bardin. But that name meant nothing. When authorities later looked into it, there were no records, no birth certificate, no military file, no school history, not even a driver's license. It was as if the man had simply appeared out of thin air. He looked to be in his late 30s, neatly dressed, polite, and always calm. The widow who owned the boarding house, a woman named Mrs. Greeley, said she remembered the exact moment he walked in. "He looked like someone who had seen too much," she said years later. "Not scared, but tired, like he already knew what was coming." John Bardin was strange, but not in any loud or obvious way. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't attend church. He rarely left the house. Every morning, like clockwork, he would sit on the back porch with a cup of black coffee and his notebook. He wrote constantly, page after page in small, careful handwriting. People assumed he was a writer or a professor. But what he was writing was not a novel. It wasn't a diary either. It was a list, a long list of events. Each one dated, each one described in short, cold sentences. Some of the entries were about minor things. June 6th, flash flood on Route 38, 3 cars lost. Others were horrifying. July 14th, Councilman Blake found dead in vehicle, no foul play suspected. And then there were those that made no sense at all. August 23rd, corridor breach begins, containment fails. October 12th, contact with Station Bravo lost permanently. These notes would have meant nothing if they didn't start coming true. It began slowly, almost too quietly for anyone to notice at first. The chemical plant on the outskirts of town, Oak Ridge Industries, had always been a ticking time bomb. People said the safety protocols were outdated, the machines too old, the smell of gas leaks common as morning coffee. But no one expected it to explode. Not like that. Not so suddenly. The blast lit up the early May sky like a false sunrise. 7 workers died instantly, and several more were injured. The fire took hours to contain. Most people blamed negligence. But when word got around that a man staying at Mrs. Greeley's had written it down, the exact date, the exact number of dead, 2 full weeks before it happened, people started to pay attention. At first, she brushed it off as coincidence, a lucky guess. But then came the flash flood that swept away 3 cars on Route 38. The water rose from nowhere after a sudden storm, one so localized that nearby towns stayed dry. Bardin had written about that too. And then, barely a week later, Councilman Blake was found slumped over the wheel of his car, parked outside his office, the engine still running. No signs of violence, heart attack, they said, natural causes. But once again, Bardin had it written in his notebook, dated, underlined, described exactly. The same councilman, the same time, even the weather. That's when Mrs. Greeley told a neighbor, in passing, and the slow whispers started to grow teeth. The neighbor told her cousin, who worked at the diner, who mentioned it to the town sheriff, who quietly had one of his deputies take a look at the man's notebook. Within days, everyone in town was talking about the strange man in room 4B. Some called him the Prophet. Others said he was a spy, a freak, maybe even possessed. But most just wanted to know how he knew. The local police had no idea what to do with him. He hadn't broken any laws. He didn't seem dangerous. He paid his bills, kept to himself, and spoke politely to everyone. Still, they felt uneasy. 2 officers paid him a visit. They expected resistance, paranoia, maybe anger. But Bardin was calm. He invited them in, answered every question, showed them the notebook without hesitation. "I'm not predicting anything," he said. "I'm just writing what I remember." The younger officer asked, "How can you remember things that haven't happened yet?" Bardin looked him straight in the eye and said, "Because where I'm from, they already did." That answer stayed with the officer for the rest of his life. At first, the town leaned toward the idea that Bardin was mentally ill. He had no family, no friends, no backstory. No one saw him arrive, and no one could find any record of him anywhere. But the notebook made people doubt that theory. The level of detail was too much, too exact. A group of curious locals, including a teacher, a store owner, and a retired judge, asked to see the notebook themselves. Bardin allowed it. He sat quietly on the porch while they flipped through the pages, their expressions changing with every line. There were pages dedicated to small-town news, garage fires, weather anomalies, car crashes, but also sections that read like a history textbook from a future that hadn't happened yet. Berlin Wall erected, 1961. President assassinated in Dallas, 1963. Moon landing delayed due to signal interference, 1969. Massive blackout affects eastern U.S., 1977. Formation of the North American Energy Federation, 1986. Collapse of eastern states, 2031. Bardin spoke of all these events like someone recalling things they had already lived through. There was no hesitation in his voice, no uncertainty in his descriptions. He was like a man watching reruns of a show no one else had ever seen. And when people asked how he knew all this, how he remembered it, he always gave the same kind of answer. "Time isn't what you think," he said once to Mrs. Greeley as they shared a quiet evening on the porch. "You think it moves forward in a straight line, but that's the illusion you've been trained to see. Time loops, time bends, time breaks. The truth is, you're not moving through time. It's moving through you." She didn't understand, but she never forgot the look on his face as he said it. Like someone haunted not by ghosts, but by moments. Like someone who had seen the same scene play out over and over, always ending the same way, no matter how hard he tried to change it. Bardin claimed he wasn't the only one, that others had fallen through, though he never explained what that meant in plain language. Some, he said, arrived earlier, others much later. Most didn't last long. "They come apart," he told one of the locals who pressed him for details. "Their minds weren't ready. You stretch too far, too fast, and you snap, like a rubber band pulled beyond its limit." He didn't say whether he'd seen it happen or only heard about it, but there was a darkness behind his eyes that made people stop asking. And still, despite everything he warned about, he kept writing. Every day, filling new notebooks, recording every detail he could before he forgot. Because as he explained once, in a rare moment of openness, the memories were starting to blur. The longer he stayed in 1957, the more the future began to feel like a dream. He couldn't tell which version was real anymore. And worst of all, he said, the dates were beginning to shift. Eventually they came for him, not with sirens or uniforms, but in silence. 2 black sedans rolled up to the boarding house just after sunrise. Men in dark suits, sunglasses, and long coats stepped out without a word and walked straight to room 4B. Mrs. Greeley stood at the bottom of the stairs, clutching a dish towel in her hands, watching it all unfold like a scene from a movie she didn't want to see. They didn't knock. They opened the door, stepped inside, and led Bardin out within 30 seconds. No cuffs, no shouting, no resistance. He walked with them willingly, carrying nothing but the notebook. One of the agents paused to speak with Mrs. Greeley and simply said, "We're taking him in for questioning, possible espionage." But she wasn't convinced. She didn't believe that for a second. She noticed something the agent hadn't meant to show, his hand slightly trembling. She saw something else too, something in the younger man's eyes. Not authority, not anger, but fear. They weren't arresting Bardin because he was dangerous. They were taking him because they had no idea what else to do with someone like him. because deep down, they knew he was right. He was brought to a facility that didn't officially exist, a private site tucked deep into the countryside, known only by coordinates and a code name. No signs, no mail, no records. The doctors there were government-sanctioned, trained to evaluate spies, dissidents, and men who saw things they shouldn't. But Bardin wasn't like any of them. He answered every question calmly, with clarity and detail that unnerved everyone who spoke to him. He showed no signs of psychosis, no paranoia, no confusion, just a strange certainty, like someone describing a dream he'd lived 1,000 times before. He told them the same story over and over, that he was from the year 2032, that in his time, a military research program, part physics, part surveillance, had discovered a way to open a corridor through time, not to travel through it exactly, but to observe the past, like a window you could peek through. It was supposed to be safe, harmless, one way, but something went wrong. He said he was pushed through the breach, maybe by someone, maybe by the corridor itself. "I was the test that wasn't supposed to happen," he told one scientist. "I was the accident they never recorded." And when he arrived in 1957, he knew instantly that the timeline had already started to shift. They didn't believe him at first, but they couldn't disprove him either. His knowledge was too exact. His notebook contained events that hadn't yet occurred, but did exactly as described, days, sometimes hours later. He was allowed to keep the notebook, but now it was monitored, guarded. The pages were photographed daily. But what disturbed the staff most was what began to happen next. Entire pages appeared overnight, fully written in Bardin's handwriting, detailed descriptions of things that hadn't happened yet. But when they did happen, they were spot on. The ink was fresh but never smudged. Security logs showed no one entering his room. Bardin claimed he was writing in his sleep, or that the dreams were too clear to ignore. "I don't think I'm predicting anymore," he told one of the researchers. "I think I'm remembering alternate versions of events that didn't happen in this timeline, but might have been another." What he said next haunted the team for weeks. Time is leaking, and it's not supposed to do that. As the days passed, Bardin began speaking less and writing more. He refused to eat some days, saying it made the memories blur. He asked repeatedly for more paper, more ink, and more time. "Every moment I stay here, more fragments come loose. I have to get it down before I forget which version is real." The doctors didn't understand what he meant, but they gave him what he wanted. They thought they were containing him. In truth, he had been waiting for a specific date from the start. That date was July 29th. He had circled it in his notebook weeks before. No explanation, no warning, just a red circle and 3 simple words written beneath it: "The door closes." No one knew what it meant, but that morning at exactly 2:17 a.m., the entire facility lost power. Total blackout. No backup. No communication. The emergency systems failed without cause. Guards scrambled. The security team switched to manual systems. The power came back online 11 minutes later. When they rushed to Bardin's cell, they found it locked, unopened, sealed tight. But inside, he was gone. There was no sign of escape, no broken glass, no air vent tampered with. The cameras had glitched, cutting to static during the blackout. The sensors on the hallway outside his room showed nothing. It was as if he had blinked out of existence. The only thing left behind was the notebook. It sat open on the neatly made bed. The final page had just one sentence, written in shaky red ink: "It still happens." I tried. That was the end of the official record. The rest is rumor and whispers. The government sealed the case. All personnel were reassigned. The notebook, along with Bardin's belongings, including a photograph of a futuristic skyline labeled Chicago 2029, was moved to a top security archive. But some say the events didn't stop, that Bardin's notes contain more dates, many still in the future, and that the closer we get to those dates, the more reality begins to warp. Some believe he succeeded in altering small things. Others think he failed completely. But the most terrifying theory? He didn't escape. He was pulled back. And next time, the door might stay open. There was no sign of escape, no tunnels, no guards reported seeing or hearing anything. One camera caught a flicker, what some called a shadow blink, just before the outage. That footage was classified. So was everything else related to Bardin. The suitcase, his clothes, the strange photos he carried, images of cities with skyscrapers no one had built yet, roads full of silent electric cars, strange glowing tablets, were all stored away in a facility known only to a handful of people. In the decades that followed, rumors continued to swirl. Some say Bardin was an elaborate hoax. Others believe he was a government plant designed to test public reaction to impossible ideas. But there are those, few but persistent, who believe he was telling the truth, that he came from a dying future, that he tried to stop something catastrophic and failed. There are conspiracy forums that dissect the surviving photos. One shows a building that looks exactly like a facility in modern-day Chicago, one that wasn't built until 2019. Another shows what appears to be the sky turning red over a broken skyline, dated November 4th, 2034. But the most chilling is a simple, grainy photo of a page from his notebook. In it is a list of dates. Most have check marks next to them, but 3 remain unmarked, and the last one is only a few years away. If Bardin was real, then we may still be living on borrowed time.